Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar by the AICEP, the American Institute of Certified Educational Planners. My name is Cindy McDonald, and with me today I have Lori, I'm sorry, I can't even talk today, Weingarten. Good morning.
Hello, so happy to be back.
So we're very excited to be able to offer this webinar for you today, and we know many people are going to be joining us now, and many people will be joining us later as well. So we wanted to talk to you today about what you need to know about becoming a certified educational planner. The American Institute of Certified Educational Planners has been a commission that's been around for a number of years. And as we'll talk about later on today, the recent news has really brought the importance of the work we do to the foreground. So today we're going to talk about the steps to certification, the assessment that goes along with certification, the two parts of that, the institutional knowledge and the professional knowledge. We're going to talk about how the assessment is scored, and then we're actually going to give you tips and comments from recent test takers. So, are you ready, Lori?
Yep, ready.
All right. And we have also with us our executive administrative assistant for AICEP, Anne. So glad to have you with us, Anne, as well.
Thank you.
All right, so just a little bit about us. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off so that you know a little bit more about who we are and what our backgrounds are. I'm going to share mine, and then Lori, if you'll talk about what your background is.
Sure.
I'm president of McDonald Associates. I've had my own college counseling program or practice for many years. I live in Central California. I'm also the founder of HECA and an online college counseling tool named Guided Path. I've worked in the schools. I've been a school counselor both at the middle school and the high school level. I've worked with students both in California and remotely. I've also worked in the AVID program, which is an outreach program. And that's one of the things we want to really communicate. This is a certification for people in all different aspects of advising students. So we'll talk more about that. I've been a commissioner for AICEP, and right now I am applying, just like many of you, to become a CEP. So that gives you a little bit of background about myself. So Lori, what about?
I co-founded One Stop College Counseling about 9 years ago. So this is my 9th year full-time as an IEC. I work with students throughout all areas of New Jersey and the US, and a little bit in Asia also. And I'm very proud to say, especially after this scandal, that I am a member of as many groups as I know of. So I'm a member of IECA and HECA and NACAC and New Jersey ACAC and PACAC.
And I think that's an important aspect as well. Having that professional affiliation is very key for us as professionals and for our profession itself as well. Another thing that I also do is I teach for UCLA in the College Counseling Certificate Program, and really encourage students through that program to consider setting their goal, if not now, in the future, to become certified educational planners. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so, and we just referred to this, but college advising recently has made headlines. It's really shaken the entire college admissions community. And we've seen lots of articles and lots of things about ethics and standards in college admissions in general, but it's really focused a lot about college counseling and college advisors, and the need for a demonstration of ethics, standards, and competence has never been greater. Lori, what have been some of your experiences over the last few weeks since this headlines have broke that have really demonstrated the need for competence and standards, and has being a CEP made a difference for you?
Yes, I think the scandal kind of took everyone by surprise. Obviously, it wasn't something we were expecting. I think in many ways it brought college counseling to the forefront of people's minds. And I'm hearing from a lot of colleagues, and I've seen it myself, that the interest in college counseling has actually increased by this scandal. Hopefully, the interest it's legal college counseling, but I think at this point, it's a great selling point to say that you're affiliated with an organization, and then even more, only 2% of people have their CEP, 2% of college counselors. And I think that has been a great thing to be able to say that, look, there is some type of certification in our field. It's called the Certified Educational Planner, and it's difficult. It's kind of a board exam. And I think right now more than ever is a terrific time to get that CEP so that you can show that, it makes you more valid, I guess. It's kind of a great credential to have.
Well, and I think too that it gives us an opportunity to create an understanding of what some of the common core competencies should be and what level we should be at as a true professional. Nurses and physical therapists and other people have to demonstrate their competence. And this was the vision behind the creation of the commission, the AICEP, years ago, is giving a way to demonstrate that. And many states, including California, just recently promoted legislation that would control and have a registry for college advisors. And what's scary is that all these things would be done without the input of our profession, our organizations. I read a comment by the Western Association for College Admission Counseling, which covers California and Nevada. And they said, we want to be in contact with the legislators and have an input in this, because we know what our standards are. We don't want to have those standards imposed from the outside. So then, it really has heightened the awareness. So in many ways, I see it as the silver lining to this recent scandal. As terrible as it was, it really has given us an opportunity to highlight the good work that many, many people do in working with students and families. So
absolutely, yes, absolutely. And I think that now parents can, really, if you have that CEP designation, they'll have a little bit more faith. Okay, you've been vetted by an organization. So I think it's going to grow in popularity at this point.
I think so too. And those that work with international students, that can be quite a badge of distinction or mark of distinction for them as well.
Yes.
So that's what the Certified Educational Planner program has been about from the very beginning. It was designed to create expectations for ethical, qualified educational advising, and to create that foundation and a framework and a place to come to and say that was not ethical behavior. Establishes national standards for both educational consultants and school-based college counselors, but therapeutic and boarding school and all the other things that come that are part of that as well. Recognizes value-oriented, knowledgeable counselors and consultants, and assures an expanded knowledge and professional commitment, because it's not a matter of you just get this once and then you're done. You check that off your list, hang it on your wall, and you go. You have to be recertified every 5 years, and you have to have continuing educational units and experiences to maintain your recertification. So I think that's an important part of it as well, and will continue to be of greater importance in the future. And then it also provides the public with a guide to use to select a qualified service provider, which is what we were just talking about.
Yes.
So and as we were just saying too, it truly is a mark of distinction to become a certified educational planner. In a recent U.S. News and World Report that just came out last week, data from my ECA said that there's been a 400% increase in domestic independent educational consultants since 2005. So that's just a little over, that's 14 years. And that same time, the number of international consultants has grown by 1,000%. So, and then Lori, as you mentioned, only 2% of the consultants are certified educational planners. So how do you set yourself apart when you have this 400% increase and 1,000% on the international side, and many people are in very strong communities where there's a lot of college advising going on, and how do you set yourself apart? So Lori, you've talked about how you've used that and what that's meant for you and your community, and explain a little bit about the community where you live.
So I'm in central New Jersey. There are a lot of college counselors in our area, particularly there are many in North Jersey, but many in our area are more along the dabbler line. They're dabblers. They had their own children get into college, and then they decided they were a college counselor. They're mostly not affiliated with organizations in this area, and very, very few have their CEP. So when parents come in with their student, I do make a point of explaining the difference between a dabbler and somebody who actually is involved in the organizations and constantly training. As you said, Cindy, we are recertified every 5 years. We don't have to take the assessment again, which is nice, but we have to log everything that we do in this industry. And right on your own AICEP website, you have a portal where you can keep track of all your college visits and any talks you gave to the community, things like that. So these are things I explain to my family, that again, that 2% number is a compelling number. It is so tiny. It really puts you in this elite class of college counselors. So I've been, ever since I found out it was only 2%, I've been using that number in my presentations, because I think it does set you apart and shows, okay, this is somebody who not only, like you said, Cindy, not only got their CEP, obtained it, but they have to continue to keep up with what's going on in industry trends. So, I'm definitely talking about it. Not everyone knows what it is, but by the time they leave my office, they know what it is.
And I think that's an important thing to be able to communicate, because that not only are you communicating what your values and standards are, but you're communicating what the values and standards are for our profession. And we all have a responsibility to build that and really promote the ethics and standards. So I think it helps in two different ways. So yeah, I think that's really important. And it looks like we've got a couple of comments, and Steve says, as a California-based CEP, I can see the importance of becoming a CEP has never been greater. In the wake of the recent college admissions bribery scandal, and I talked about this, how California lawmakers are proposing new legislation. So, it helps us show our legitimacy, as you talked about, the difference between being a dabbler, and I love that term, and being a full-blown, college advisor. So that is definitely what we're looking for. So what are the steps to certification? There are two parts to it. There's the institutional knowledge and the professional knowledge. So first you have to put in an application. That's the very first step. And so that's the one that we would encourage you to take now and, get that ball rolling. Sometimes that first step is the hardest part. And then the second step is the assessment. So on your application, when you fill out the application, you share information about your educational background, your consulting or school-based college counseling or therapeutic, whatever your counseling background is, what your professional ethics are, what kind of memberships, contributions? Have you spoken at conferences? Have you presented at, organizations, things like that? That's all part of your application. And it's all things that, if you go to your resume or things that you should be keeping track of anyway, you just pull that out and use that for your professional application. I am a credentialed high school counselor here in California, or counselor per se. I have what's called a PPS credential, and I have to redo this and keep track of all this to become recertified as a counselor every 5 years. So, this is just part of that same process. And the full application is available through the website at aicep.org. But if you're a member of one of those professional organizations that we've talked about, you can contact the office, and Anne will receive your email at info@aicep.org to see.
It's aicep.org.
That's okay. aicep.org. Yes. So it's up here on the screen to see if you qualify for that special application. So if you're a professional member of IECA, you qualify for a fast application and a 50% discount. HECA members receive a 25% discount on the application. So you can get more details and more information by emailing the commission, and Anne will be glad to answer your questions, right?
Yes.
Anything else you want to add to that, Anne?
No, I think you covered that beautifully, Cindy. Thank you.
Okay, so when it gets down to, so the application's the first part, and that's pretty straightforward. Take your information and share it. Then the second part's going to be the assessment. And this assessment, you're going to demonstrate your institutional knowledge. So you're going to have on the assessment 4 colleges, schools, or therapeutic programs to select from. These are taken from those 30 institutions that you put on your application. So one of the parts of the application is making a list of 30 institutions that you visited, that you are very familiar and feel very comfortable about, understand very well. So you make your list of 30 institutions, and from that, on the assessment, 4 colleges or programs are listed on your assessment. And then you get to pick which 2 institutions that you want to write about. So, for each school or program, you provide responses to the type of student who might be happy and best served there, the admissions criteria, the standout features or attributes of the school. What are some examples of similar schools? A description of the physical plant, like the campus and where it's at, the community, things like that, and influence of the surrounding communities on the life of students. Like, what is it, what is the environment? Is it a welcoming environment? Do students interact in the community? Things of that nature. So that institutional knowledge is one thing that is part of the assessment. So here's an example. So type of student who would be happy and best served. So example 1. The type of student that might be happy at University X is one who is a B or B+ student and who needs to have good time management skills. It's a good big school with a lot of school spirit. They also have a large fraternity sorority population. The student needs to have focus and be disciplined enough to handle large classes. So things like that, just an understanding, overarching understanding of what that institution has and what kind of student would be best served there. Another example, I believe a student who has grown up in the Midwest, or at least has appreciation for D1 sports and the emphasis placed on them, would be happy here. Maybe they have a great football team, or, we just finished the basketball rush. It's, they would enjoy that basketball popularity, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Student would want to have a large rah-rah school and would have to be a joiner. The Greek life at X seems to be a big part of the institution. And so, it might help if the student knew what he wanted to study, as one could get lost in such a big environment. So again, just showing there's your understanding and comprehension of those different institutions. So I noticed, and there was one question about for certification, if you have to revisit all those 30 schools, and the answer is no. For recertification, it's on a different, you just keep track of the schools you visit and the education units, the professional development that you've done, and things like that. Is that correct, Anne?
Yes, I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood the question, that you don't have to come up with a list of new schools for your recertification. You can go back and visit some of the same schools. You can visit new schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And I think there is a limit. I think you do. I mean, there's a minimum. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 50 schools.
It's 75.
75 schools in 5 years. Is that right?
That's correct.
75 in 5 years. So I do always make sure I'm keeping track of which colleges I've visited, because 5 years from now, I'll never remember what I did 5 years ago. So I keep track right on the portal.
Right. And the other point about that too is, we have to go back and revisit schools because things change, and especially schools programs. If you're doing therapeutic programs, sometimes you have to visit those almost on an annual basis. So revisiting schools, having a school on your list that you've visited in the past, and then having that part of your recertification is not a problem at all, because there is a need to, that's how we stay up to date and stay abreast of things, is by revisiting schools in addition to visiting new schools. So yeah, I think that's a good question. So then the second part of the assessment is professional knowledge, and the applicant is given 2 short cases. So on the assessment, you're given 2 short cases and case studies, and they cover self-reported fields of your professional expertise. So if you're a school-based counselor doing boarding school or school placement, you'll have 2 short cases based on that. If you're doing therapeutic, it'll be based on that. If you're college counseling, it'll be based on that. So you'll tell, when you put in your application, you'll designate what your area of expertise is, and that's what your assessment will be based on. So after reading each case study, you're asked as the applicant to assess those college or school characteristics that would be right for the student. Provide and rationalize specific institution recommendations. This is the kinds of schools I would recommend for this student because, X, Y, Z. Case evaluations include an assessment of the counseling techniques, sensitivity, individual student needs, diversity, just being sensitive to those situation of the students, and ethics. And now we're seeing such a high emphasis on that ethics. And so that all becomes, and this should all be part of, once you have experience, this certification is not appropriate until after you've been working with students for a period of years. The recommended time is about 5 years, because you need to build that level of expertise and knowledge and experience. All right, so let's keep moving on here. Here's a sample vignette from the professional knowledge. Somebody wrote about in their assessment, Caroline Flores she would have been the case study. She's a junior at an inner high school with a very diverse student body. She's a delightful young woman with a lot going for her, yet not very self-confident. She's a strong junior year with grades A's and B's, gives her GPA and what it's weighted, gets her SAT or ACT score. She's warm and empathetic. Family vacation in Mexico each summer. I can really relate to that because I have a lot of students that fall into that category here. Her mother is white and her father is part white and part Latino. While she looks Latina, she identifies as white. So her family have financial resources and will likely qualify for need-based aid at a very expensive colleges only. So what kind of response, if you're given that kind of case or vignette on a student, what kind of response can you give? Well, here's an example. We're looking for a college for an underconfident, caring, community service-minded student. She and her parents are on the same page in wanting a small and middle-sized college with diversity. So qualifying for Merit Aid is a bonus. She currently has 3.0 and a 20 ACT. Earlham comes to mind. The Quaker principles of tolerance and inclusion would be good. The students are friendly, and while vigorous, the academics are not stifling. I believe Caroline would thrive in this sort of environment. So just sharing that kind of understanding and knowledge about different colleges. And the assessment's not looking for a specific set of colleges. It's just the rationale and what's behind it. So here's another one. Redlands is worth a look. It's reasonably diverse. It's a small school and works to create a happy community. So it goes through and says, although Caroline says she would like to be in the Midwest or East, she indicates she is open to location. So having her research Redlands makes sense. So again, just saying, here are some options and here's why they would be good for this student. Kalamazoo, the calendar with options of work, study abroad, and senior project would provide a solid learning platform for Caroline. So again, sharing your knowledge and expertise is what's going to be the most important thing. And a lot of this is just going to come naturally to you because of your knowledge and experience in the profession. So once you take the assessment, then it's turned in. They're always proctored. The assessments are turned in, and they're graded or scored anonymously. So those that are scoring don't see the name. They don't know anything about the person that took the assessment. So here are the guiding principles of scoring. So, and I mentioned some of these as we've gone through, just the recognition of the needs and concerns of adult learners. We know that many of us have not taken a test or an assessment like this in many, many years, and that's okay. We're going to talk about it. We did some interviews and we've talked about that. Confidentiality, I mentioned no reader is aware of the name of the person. Numbers and letters are used for identification, so it's clearly anonymous. And writing should reflect a professional who has sensitivity to student needs, understanding of educational options, and ethical student-centered counseling practice. That's what it's looking for. Overall perspectives are more important than details or memorization. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Readers are looking for candidates able to visualize or place a particular institution against the landscape of institutions. So that's the institutional knowledge on section 1. And section 2, a clear understanding of appropriate choices and an excellent rationale for those choices is sought. So, if you're in Washington or New Jersey, you're going to come up with one list. If you're in Florida or Georgia, you might come up with another one. And, those that are in Oregon or Arizona might come up with a different list, and that's okay. It's the rationale behind it that's important. So why was becoming a CEP important to you? We asked some CEPs this, and you'll see Lori. We've got Lori's interview in here too, so let's take a listen. So I hope this is the part that hopefully you guys can hear this.
I wanted a way to quantify my experience beyond my professional memberships and beyond my college counseling certificate.
I think the fact that now there's an organization that has established criteria to designate those who are most knowledgeable in the field is really helpful. It provides consumers with some security and some confidence that the person that they're hiring has the knowledge and the expertise to guide students through the process.
And take me to a different level of me trying to become who I wanted to become.
And secondly, I had tremendous respect for those colleagues who were already CEPs.
So that's why becoming a CEP was important to many people. Now, we also asked in our interviews, what were your concerns when you applied to be a CEP? And see if you can identify with any of these. Whoops. Let's go back.
considering the exam process, the application process, preparing for the exam seemed daunting to me. And finding the time was quite challenging. And then that little voice of self-doubt. I've been doing this forever, over 12 years. Would I be able to pass the exam?
So I had one concern, and that was the test. I didn't mind doing the application beforehand. I haven't taken a test since I finished graduate school. And I don't like taking tests. I'm not sure anybody likes taking tests, but I really thought that was decades behind me.
So that is definitely something we can all relate to in terms of the test and what the concerns were. So how were those concerns handled by AICEP?
I shared some of them, but they were handled perfectly. And I was very fortunate. I think I had Steve Antonoff, who walked with me through this process. He was extremely kind and generous with his time. He was very patient. He explained the process.
And so Steve was great. He goes, you know what, let me check into it. And so then he was able to find someone in Austin who was a CEP and agreed to proctor my test. And that just sealed the deal. That's where.
But it was really something I had to deal with internally. Will I gear myself up and study for this test and take it, or do I just let this go? And I felt that the benefits of getting that CEP designation really outweighed the fact that I'm going to be frustrated that I have to study for a test.
Absolutely. So now we're going to go to, well, what are some tips you have? And then Lori, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Seek the counsel of the CEP board. Seek out a mentor.
So I really focused on the first part of the institutional knowledge, where Steve had told me I need to give him 30 schools that I'm familiar with. You guys would pick 4, and then I would write on 2 of them, which automatically didn't sound so overwhelming to me.
If you can, 1, do it in your home area, that would be great. And 2, it's just obviously finding the time that is probably, as if any of us have a least busy time, but there are some times that are more of a lull. 3, I think, it's just figuring out your game plan for studying, just like you used to, in any of your educational backgrounds things. I had, my cards that I had memorized. I had my forms that I had set up for all my college tours. It was just a matter of memorization and just really trying to think about my cases that I had done working with my students.
So tips about taking the test. And Lori, I want to go back to and see if you have anything to add in terms of the overall perspectives and the assessment itself.
Well, it's divided. The assessment's divided into those 2 parts: the institutional knowledge and the professional knowledge. And I found, and I think a lot of people who have taken the test since me have also found, that it's the institutional knowledge that's a little bit, there's more preparation for that, because because the professional knowledge is something you do every day. The professional knowledge are just cases where, I don't mean to say just cases, but it's as if somebody came into your office and gave you a description of what they're looking for. And that part, I don't think there's much to even prepare for if you've been in this industry for a while and your experience. That part is not difficult. But the institutional knowledge, it's not that it's difficult, it's just that it does require just reviewing your notes a little bit. So the part that I loved about it was that I got to pick the 30 schools, and then AICEP picked 4 of the 30, but I had already picked those schools as schools that I really knew a lot about. And then once I got the 4 on my assessment, I only had to choose 2. So that I found was great. It just took some of the pressure off. And then in terms of, I guess, do you want to go back to the tips? Do you want to talk about how I studied for this?
Yes, that would be.
So in tips to taking the test, the way I did it, and there are many ways to study, and I've spoken to a lot of different CEPs and we've all prepared differently, but if you contact the AICEP on their website, on their email, info@aicep.org, they will actually share my spreadsheet that I use to prepare with you. What I did is I made 3 separate spreadsheets to study for the institutional part, and I put them, I took my 30 schools on each of the 3 spreadsheets. One of them, I listed the 30 schools in alphabetical order. Another one, I listed them in ACT score from lowest to highest. I could have done SAT, but at the time, with the changes coming, it was just easier to do the ACT. And then the class size, so large school to small school. So that way I felt that I had them grouped differently, and the way I memorize things, I found that easier for me to deal with. And then across the spreadsheet on the columns, I had things such as, is it a public university or a private university? What percent are typically admitted, so I could see the selectivity. What are their average scores? What was their class size? Is it a test optional school? What were the graduation rates? Is merit offered? What's the ethnic background in the breakdown? So I wanted to know if there was ethnic diversity or not. And then also cost of attendance. So I didn't memorize my spreadsheet, but I wanted to just keep familiarizing myself with those 30 schools that I knew I was going to write about 2 of them. And for me, that was a great way to know the data. I then pulled up the Princeton Review book. I think right now it's the best 384 colleges. Back then it was like the best 370 something colleges. And most of my schools were in that book. So I was able to just read this 2-page summary on each school and write down things that stood out to me, unique qualities of each school. And then I reviewed them. And people always ask me, how long did I spend reviewing? So I think I'm kind of in the middle, just from talking to people. Some people tell me they spend an entire week. I thought I did a lot. I spent a day and a half. So I spent the night before, and then I spent one full day. So the night before the full day. So I spent one night and then an entire day just reviewing the schools, making sure I was what I felt like was an expert at the schools. And honestly, when I took the assessment, I may have over-prepared. But I think that a lot of us in this field are passionate about what we're doing, and we take pride in our work. And I think many of us, maybe type A personalities, do over-prepare. But it was a day and a half. And then the other part, the professional knowledge, I didn't really prepare for, because I did feel like it's something I do every day. My only way of preparing for that part, which is the case study part, is I just went through basically looked at the list of colleges in the US just quickly, like maybe 15 minutes, because you don't have a list of colleges in front of you. And I just wanted to have some in my mind that I'm not always thinking about. So I did that. So in terms of this slide here, tips for taking the test, one of the bottom left, my best studying was done through my work with families and students. I definitely found that was applicable to me for the professional part. The one in the middle where it says somebody used the 2-page wintergreen data set. I did not do that, but I think that's a great suggestion. And then on the top right, I also did not do this, but it is a great suggestion, where the person wrote, I would suggest, considering the test, plan to use some of those slightly less busy times of year to prepare. I did it right in the middle of the fall when I was busiest, which makes no sense in retrospect. But, March, April, May, when things might not be quite as busy, this might be a good time to start applying for your CEP.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. So here are some other tips from others that have taken the test. Do you want to share some of those?
Okay, so on the left, I love the last part on the top left where it says prepare and take the test simple. my phrase with a lot of my students lately has been just make it happen, just do it. And I feel like with this, it is such a great credential to have. And it was a fantastic feeling when I completed the assessment and then received my CEP, maybe 4 to 6 weeks later, I think. But I feel like it might not be simple, but just do it. It's really a great thing to have, and it's a fantastic credential to be able to tell your parents and students that you are a certified educational planner. And then I think the one in the middle where it says the case studies will feel familiar. Anybody who's in this field for 5 years or more, or depending on the amount of cases you have, maybe a little less, it will feel familiar to you. I can't say enough how much I was reading a scenario as if somebody was coming into my office presenting, this is our situation. This is where our daughter goes to high school. This is what she's experienced. This is what we're looking for based on her needs. And then I just answer the question. So I really feel that part of it is where we all thrive, where we excel. I mean, this is what we do. And then the one on the right, this was actually my input, where it says I was speaking to a potential client in Singapore, and I noticed that their high school stated something along the lines of, if you must hire an independent, at least make sure they have their CEP. So that was a school that had right above it said, we don't feel you need to hire an independent counselor because our school counselors are excellent. But then they did add that if you must hire one, make sure they have their CEP. And I noticed that about a few weeks after I received my CEP. So it was kind of an, oh, wow moment, wow, there at least one high school is actually saying that is a credential worth having. So I think all the other comments on this page are very good, but I don't want to read them all to you.
No, but I think that what it shows is that, a lot of times we do have, and I've can put myself in a lot of these cases, the hesitation or wondering, can I do this? And we can, you do, you have, I agree with this one comment is I think everyone knows more than they think they know. I think that's very true. We, as you said, Lori, we tend to have expect a lot of ourselves and not have as much confidence in who we are and what we know as we should. And I think this comment here in the middle is very apropos for right now. I believe we should ask of ourselves the same we ask of our young students. As respected professionals, we should hold ourselves to a standard of excellence. And now more than ever, it is crucial. So, and I think that was shown, and we had a record number of people register for this webinar today because of this recent news. I believe that's really demonstrated this is something that we need to pay attention to and demonstrate, our qualifications as a professional. And by becoming a CEP and going through this process, will demonstrate to the families you work with, but also, as you can see from these comments, to yourself, the professional level that you have, right?
Absolutely. I totally agree. Completely agree.
So then after the assessment, you receive a certificate. You can proudly hang on your wall. So tell us more about that, and then we'll talk about the card too.
Right. So after I got the notification that I was now a CEP, I did get the certificate in the mail, and I promptly framed it, and it is my office has a waiting room, and when you walk in, it's right in the center of the wall. It's a nice certificate with I framed it nicely, and I'm proud of it, and I think it looks great, and people do see it. It is prominently displayed. If people ask about it, once they see it, I do say, it's the highest level of recognition that a counselor can attain. It showcases your knowledge, your professionalism, and your accomplishment. And I think it helps assure families that you're remaining current in the field, because you do have to be recertified every 5 years. So I love the certificate. I think it's a great thing to have, and it's actually a certificate that means something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a participation certificate.
And then also you receive a card too, right?
Yes, so I didn't even realize this originally, but you can get a whole bunch of cards to hand out to your prospective clients. So when you first meet them and you're explaining how you handle, how you run your business with the student, how you work with the family, you can also hand them this CEP card that explains what's required and that you have met the highest quality of service, and you've gone through this. It's really a board assessment, and it's like passing a board exam. So these cards are great, and I think they're a terrific thing to be able to hand to somebody and let them read it. They can't always absorb everything right when you're telling them, because it's almost information overload, but I give it to them in a little folder, and they can take that card home and look at it. And then when they're looking for somebody else, if shopping around, they can see whether or not they are also a CEP.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's hear from a few more people about the benefits that they've seen from being a CEP. Whoops, let's try that.
I have the certificate prominently displayed in my office. I have the initials after my name.
I think legitimized me because I didn't come from an education background, so there's that. Two, I think it has really been a benefit because whenever we do pitches to families, right, that is one of the things that I include. I'm one of 3 CEPs in the Austin area, and I think one of 10 in the state of Texas, which means that we've gone to an extra level, that other layer of really trying to become very professional in our line of work.
There are numerous benefits. I think there were surprise benefits, but I think that it actually gave me the confidence to enter into more of a global conversation with other colleagues, peers, about what's happening in higher ed.
So giving that global confidence, I love how Pat talks about that and what that meant for her. And that's something that you've mentioned as well, Lori. So now those of you that have been with us during this webinar, we want to encourage you to follow up on what we've shared with you today. And if you want to learn more or hear the full interviews, those are available on a YouTube channel. There's a link that will be posted on the website. The full interview with Lori, Patricia, Deb, Vita, and Andrea. So that way you can get hear some more voices and learn a little bit more about this process. We do have a follow-up webinar, a second webinar. It's the CEP assessment designed to help you show what you know. It's going to be offered by Steve Antonoff and Rachel Sobel, both commissioners. Steve is basically the founder of the commission. This is going to be Wednesday, June 5th, 2019. I believe it's on the website currently, so you can go to the website and register for that. And this webinar is a follow-up to the one we're doing today, and it's to help alleviate stress by helping you create a concrete plan to ace the assessment. So they'll talk more about the questions asked and give more sample responses, and give you an actual case study with comments from evaluators to demonstrate what's expected. So we've shown you what the comments people make. You'll get to see what evaluators say and what that looks like. And you'll learn about how the assessment is scheduled and other logistics. So we would encourage you to follow up and register for that webinar and take advantage of that. So in closing, we have some time left. We can take some questions. Anne, do you have anything you want to add about this process of finding out more, registering for the webinars, getting the application itself?
You can get the regular application off of our website, or you can email me and I'm happy to send that to you. We have the opportunity for you to fill out a fillable form version of the application, or data isn't saved on your computer, I can send you a Word version. If you are a HECA member or an IECA professional member, just email me at info@aicep.org and I can send you more specific information. And then we do have some questions that I was not able to answer whenever you're ready to take those questions, Cindy and Lori.
We are ready.
Okay. One question came up in reference to the case study. And the question was, can we suggest that she should have a neuropsych evaluation done? There may be some learning issues.
Oh, yes. There's actually the third part of the professional assessment. Actually, let me just pull it up. It says, case evaluations include an assessment of counseling techniques, sensitivity to individual student needs, and ethics. And on some of those, there might not be much to write, but on some, based on the case, you can absolutely suggest things like that. I know, like in my cases, I suggested that the family needed to go back and do a little bit more research on the schools. I think I suggested in one of my cases that the student might need to be evaluated for a learning difference, especially if you're working with, I was doing college, but with therapeutic, you can absolutely, based on what the case is presenting, suggest a neuropsych evaluation. So some of those cases, there's a lot of room to suggest something based on what you're presented, and other parts for that particular question, there's not that much to write. But the answer is yes, absolutely, you can suggest that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori. The next question is, does AICEP encompass an understanding of how a student's calculated EFC and how colleges make financial aid or merit decisions is integrated into finding right fit colleges?
If that is part, I mean, as you saw on the one case study, there is a mention in not all, but some of the case studies of college affordability. And if that's something that you incorporate in your practice and commonly counsel students, and absolutely you can put that in. I know in my practice, that's how I started, was doing financial aid consulting. And so college affordability is a big part of what I do as a counselor and many others. So yes, that can be a part of what your response is and the approach that you take. The case studies are broad enough that they'll cover lots of different aspects. So I know some people that don't cover that, and that's a part of it. We all need to demonstrate competence in that level, but you're able to enter in or approach the case study from the perspective that you're coming from.
Great, thank you, Cindy. The next question is, can you share the stats on the % of applicants that fail the exam on the first try?
I'm glad that question came up. I noticed that too. And the part of the value and the reason for having a two-step process is that when you put in your application, it's evaluated. If there are questions or maybe it looks like there might be some gaps, the commission will come back and ask you those questions, and you're not pushed forward to that assessment level unless through the reviewing of your application, it's felt like you're ready to go. So I don't know that we have statistics per se, but I know from my experience that very few people fail the exam because they're not promoted to the exam unless they're ready. Now, there are people who do not pass, and then they're encouraged to come back and do it again, at a later time. So it's not the way the system is set up. It's to help you be ready as you get to those different steps and stages.
That's a really good point, Cindy, because we want everyone to pass. We want everyone to be certified. And so there's many commissioners who are dedicated to helping you be prepared for the assessment.
Mm-hmm.
The next, and also if you do not pass the assessment the first time, but are invited to retake it in 6 to 12 months, there is no fee for taking the assessment a second time.
Good. Yeah.
And then another question is, how do I find a mentor in my area?
You mean a mentor for the test, or I'm not sure what type of mentor.
I don't know. This was what the question
How do you
was posed.
Well, I think maybe have that needs to be a little bit more clarified. So, sending an email into the office with more specifics will be helpful. And then we'll be able to answer that because there are lots of different types of mentors. But I do see questions about the master's degree. Do you want us to address those?
Yes. One question is, a master's required for certification, or can a BA with higher ed experience suffice? And another question is, what would be an equivalent to a master's degree?
Yeah, so the two are very related. And I think the emphasis is on a master's degree or equivalent experience. And basically it's not a codified, you have to check this box off. That's why the application asks for your experiences, your professional organizations that you belong to, your leadership, what presentations. It just gives an opportunity to provide the breadth of your experience. And then from that, the evaluation come back and say, yes, it looks like you have the equivalent of master's, or maybe you need a little bit more in this area or that area. So if you don't have a master's, but you do have experience like higher ed or with the school or therapeutic, whatever your expertise is, I would encourage you to go ahead and fill out the application, because it's one of those things that you don't know what you're missing until you ask. And we tell our students all the time, you don't know what the answer is unless you ask the question. And if it's no, that's okay, but you can't get the answer unless you ask. So I would encourage people to go ahead and complete the application. There are many people who are CEPs who do not have the master's degree, but have demonstrated that equivalence. So don't let that stop you. Show what you know and do it through the application. And the commission, as they review the applications, will tell you, here's what we see, and these are the further questions, or here's the areas that we need you to work on.
And then another question is, when and where are the tests offered?
So the tests, and Lori, I'll let you talk about this too. The tests are offered, you can either take them at some of the professional organization conferences, like, you could take them at your ACAC. Like we have the Super ACAC coming up for the Western. You can do them at those conferences. More and more, I think people are choosing to take them at other times, and you just go to a lot of already certified educational planners, service proctors for others that are taking the CEP assessment. So the commission will help you. You write, Anne, as you've talked to, many people have mentioned how Steve would help find someone in their area to be a proctor. So you can either arrange to do it at a professional organization, a meeting, something like that, or arrange to do it in an area near you, depending on how close another CEP is. If you're not in an area that has other CEPs nearby, you can go to someone's office. I've had people come down to my office and take the exam. So it's pretty flexible in terms of setting that up. It's all based on your needs and your location.
Great. And I didn't want to take the time out at a conference to do it, just because I'm always running around like a crazy person at the conferences trying to get everything in. So so Steve Antonoff actually just asked me, because he's not from New Jersey, he just said, who's in your area, who has their CEP? And I went on the website and I told him which ones. And then he said, let me get back to you. And like a day or two later, he got back to me and said, okay. And he gave me the name of somebody who I could just, meet up with them. I ended up going to her house and I just took the test there. And that was perfect because I didn't have to miss the conference. We found a mutually convenient time, and it was just a lovely way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are looking at that as a way. And if you're an international counselor, I know I see some of you I know that are international. There are CEPs internationally, and the commission's looking at other options and ways to meet those needs as well. So don't be afraid to, in all of this, my best message for you is don't be afraid to ask the question or raise the question, because we're willing to work with you and your particular circumstances and make it work for you. So
I wanted to elaborate on an answer that I gave to one of the questions, and that was from someone who works with colleges as well as boarding schools.
Mm-hmm.
And would you have to submit a list of all colleges only? And I said, no, it could be a mix of colleges and boarding schools. But what I wanted to add is, then if your practice is kind of 50-50, you could submit a list of half colleges, half boarding schools. Your case studies could be a mix, or if you're predominantly boarding schools, then your case studies would be about boarding schools.
Yeah.
And then a couple of other questions, is it open book? Is it timed? I tried to answer those, but you might address those.
Yeah, that's a very good a good question. It would be a good one for us to discuss. So Lori, you want to take that one, talk about the timing and how the assessments.
Okay, so it's definitely not open book. That's why I said during the professional assessment to study for it, I spent just a few minutes reviewing all the colleges I've heard of, just going down a list to get them kind of in my head, because you don't have any materials in front of you. So you don't have a list of colleges, or normally in your practice, of course you would, but you could use resources, but there are no resources on this. So you are just, using your knowledge that's stored in your brain. But in terms of how long it takes, I think it depends on the person. So, and I don't remember I think the average is about 3 hours. It took me a little bit longer than that, just because I talk a lot and I write a lot. So I was a little wordy. So I think mine went on and on. So it did take quite a bit longer, but, I think if you know the questions in advance, you don't know the schools in advance, and you don't know the cases, but you have the questions in advance. And if you can be concise and to the point, you should be able to finish it in 3 hours. I just am long-winded.
Yeah, I think the average is probably 3 to 5 hours, and some people have done it in 90 minutes. Some people have taken 8 hours. So it really does depend on your style and approach, but it's not meant to be arduous at all. Go ahead, Ann.
And Lori, you can take the assessment on your laptop, right? You don't have to write this out by hand.
Right. You can take it on your laptop. You just can't use your laptop to research schools or anything. But yes, I did it in a Word document and sent the whole thing. When I was done, I just attached it to an email and sent it over. So yes, definitely your own laptop, just you can't open any other windows.
Okay, thank you. And one other question was, will the recording of the webinar be available? And yes, in a few days when it's available, I will send an email out to all the participants with the link to the recording, and also to the PowerPoint slides. Is that correct, Cindy?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We will have the PowerPoint and all available. Yes. And it'll be posted on the website.
So I think that's pretty much all of the questions. I tried to answer a number as we went along, but
and we are out of time as well. So thank you everyone for being with us today. And please be sure to register for the upcoming webinar that's going to be in June, the follow-up to this. And we look forward to seeing your emails in the coming into Ann's inbox. And if you see us at conferences, more than welcome to stop Lori or I or anyone who you'll see people who wear a badge that says, "I'm certified, are you?" And that's referring to become a CEP. So stop them and ask them and find out for yourself why this is such a valuable experience and certification for you to have. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Ann. This should conclude our webinar for today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy and Lori.
Yeah, thank you guys. Great.
All right. Bye-bye.